Chapter 51 Ironclad Ambition, Part 2. A few days later, Pepper came to receive Stark's discharge from the hospital. The driver took Pepper and Stark out of the Presbyterian Hospital and onto the main road. Before they had gone far, a loud explosion came from the rear of a car, followed by the sound of a smoke grenade being thrown. Hissing sounds released a cloud of white mist that quickly enveloped everything in sight. Stark quickly tugged Pepper down beside him. The sound of bullets whizzing by filled the air as they struck the bulletproof glass, causing the entire car to shake. Stark cursed under his breath and took out his phone to call for the Jaeger, but Pepper shoved him and said, "Damn it, you're still injured. Call Rhodes first and have him come and pilot the Jaeger." Before Stark could retort, Pepper snatched the phone, hid under the car seat, and called Rhodes, saying, "Tony and I were attacked on our way out of the hospital. Call us quickly." As soon as she finished speaking, a huge tremor came from the ground, and the sound of heavy objects hitting the ground, along with the clattering of machinery, echoed around them. Stark looked back and saw several huge robots surrounding them outside the car window. The driver in the front seat had been shot, so Stark had to climb into the driver's seat himself. Pepper ran her fingers through her hair and said, "Turn right over to the square, so the reinforcements can spot us immediately." Fortunately, Stark's safety vehicle was of good quality. He immediately started the engine and accelerated, beginning his desperate escape. He slammed his fist on the steering wheel and said, "Thank goodness we were discharged at night." Then he turned around and saw 5 or 6 large robots chasing after him. Stark said, "I have to go out and fight. If they're planning to self-destruct here, that would be terrible. This is the city center, and not far from the Presbyterian Hospital. If so many robots explode here, the entire hospital will probably be razed to the ground." The car was going faster and faster, and Stark was losing control of it. He drifted around a corner, leaving black tire marks on the ground, and the screeching sound of brakes carried far. Just as the nearest robot was about to leap onto the car, Stark heard a loud bang. A figure dangling in midair kicked the robot in the head, sending it flying. Peter landed on the roof with a thud, poked his head into the driver's seat, and said, "Wasn't I just in time?" Then he looked up and said quickly, "Hey, listen, don't go straight, turn left. There's a traffic jam ahead. If these big guys get past us, all the cars will be crushed to scrap metal." After saying that, he shot out another spider silk, which quickly stuck to the wall of the building. Then he stepped on the robots and moved around until he angered them all. One of the robots raised its arm and fired a rocket at him. With a loud bang, Spider-Man was unharmed, but the door of a shop was blown off, and the shop assistant inside was cut by broken glass. Spider-Man had to rush in to rescue him. "Looks like that Spider Boy is busy too," Stark said. "These guys are making too much of a commotion. Someone has to go rescue them." Pepper said, "Rhodes must have called Steve and Schiller. Let's mind our own business first." Stark's wounds were still throbbing slightly. A few days wouldn't be enough for him to fully recover. Then he looked up and saw the shadow of a helicopter looming over the car. Rhodes, clinging to the helicopter door, yelled at him, "Drive south, quickly. We can't fight them hand-to-hand here. A lot of people will die." Stark gritted his teeth, twisted the steering wheel hard, and the car lurched to the left, spun around, scraped against 2 road posts, and then crashed hard into a street corner. Stark opened the somewhat damaged car door, and Pepper, feeling a little dizzy from the swaying, was helped out of the car by Stark. Spider-Man tore 2 giant lampposts off with his webs, then wielded one of them, causing considerable trouble for the robots. Stark yelled, "Jarvis, arm yourself." Soon, a gold and red mech flew over. After Iron Man finished arming himself, he first carried Pepper to the rooftop and placed her in a safe place. Then Rhodey also put on the mech. This is a small factory that manufactures machine parts. Fortunately, it was late, so most of the workers had already gone home, and the security guards who heard the commotion had already fled. When the robots arrived, Iron Man and Rhodes were already eagerly waiting for them. Spider-Man swung over from behind, followed by Captain America. Because those big guys had trampled through the city, many people were injured. Spider-Man's organizational skills weren't very good, so Steve was the one who evacuated the crowd. Although Peter's close combat skills were not strong, his brute strength, speed, and agility made those metal cans dizzy and created a good environment for Iron Man to attack. Sparks from a few palm shots caused small explosions. Iron Man darted through the giant robots and Rhodey took down 2. He yelled, This won't do. If they all self-destruct, none of us will escape. This isn't right, this is very wrong. Stark finally realized. These robots are definitely not Obadiah's doing. Even if he took the core energy source, he couldn't have made so many robots in such a short time. This requires a complete military-industrial chain. Stark's military production lines are all controlled by Pepper. Obadiah couldn't have kept it from her and produced so many at once. He had barely finished speaking when one of the large robots he'd hit with his palm cannon charged at him. Spider-Man yelled from the other side, "Get out of the way! Danger!" With the Iron Man armor powered up to its maximum, it rapidly ascended, and with a deafening boom, another charred crater was blasted into the spot. Luckily, I modified the jet propulsion system, otherwise it wouldn't have been able to withstand such a huge impact. As he spoke, he swooped down again, quickly grabbed a robot, and threw it away. This time, Iron Man was smarter. After throwing it away, he immediately turned around and flew back. Sure enough, there was another loud explosion soon after. Stark reacted quickly, but Steve, who was behind him, wasn't so lucky. He used his shield to block the aftershocks of the impact, but he was still blown over. Damn it! What the hell is all this stuff? Iron Man hovered in mid-air, looking at the charred wreckage on the ground. He said, "I recognize it. That's part number 7 before the modification. It's the version I gave to the military." He glanced back at Rhodes, who was still locked in battle with the robot, silently raised his mech, and then went to deal with the next enemy. Explosions continued one after another, but other robots joined the battle, and the place was almost blown to smithereens. It must be said that this tactic is very effective. The large number of explosions are always accompanied by strong impacts, keeping everyone busy dealing with them. What's even more cunning is that once a robot tries to escape from this war zone, the superheroes have to actively chase after it and catch it. Otherwise, if it self-destructs in a residential area, it will be terrible. Although Iron Man gradually figured out the pattern, the interval between the two attacks was too short. He didn't have time to improve his armor to deal with these suicide infantrymen. 2 consecutive explosions rang out, and Iron Man was thrown away, with sparks flying from his armor. Seeing that he had made a mistake, 4 or 5 robots immediately surrounded him. They did not intend to engage Iron Man in close combat. Their only goal was to kill him with an explosion. Just as the first robot's chest lit up with a red light, the ground shook again, and a violent roar rang out. A huge arm grabbed the robot and threw it away, causing it to crash into the wall and explode. A steel monster twice the size of the self-destructing robots appeared. Iron Man got up from the ground, then flew into the air, exclaiming, "What the hell is this? Where did they get so many robots?" The steel monster tore a self-destructing robot in 2, ripping out the bomb from its chest. Rhodes was stunned. He exclaimed, "What's going on? Why are they fighting each other? Can't you see? They're not the same group," Captain America shouted. The situation on the field is incredibly complicated. The superheroes have to deal with the self-destructing robots to prevent them from exploding, while the steel monster seems only interested in tearing the robots apart. Iron Man was at a loss for who to fight, while Spider-Man, disregarding everything and seeing the whole world as his enemy, tripped the self-destructing robot with his webs and punched the iron monster. Before long, the self-destructing robots were mostly dealt with. Some were thrown out and exploded, while others had their bombs dug out. Just as they breathed a sigh of relief, they saw another huge figure appear on the roof of the building opposite. An enlarged version of a self-destructing robot jumped down, also painted in black and gold, but more than 3 times the size of Iron Man's suit. It landed with a huge roar. "My God, what are these? I've never seen so many robots in my life," Peter said. "Are they a family of 3? Captain America walked over with his shield and said, "If that's the case, then you can tell who the sun is just by looking at their size." "You broke our agreement," the robot that had just jumped down said. "You tricked me," the steel monster said, clearly indicating that both robots were piloted. Stark looked shocked, and he and Rhodes exclaimed almost simultaneously, "Uncle Obadiah!" and "General Johnson!" Before they could even find out what was going on, the 2 giant steel robots became entangled. It's clear that while these 2 robots are very strong, their 2 pilots are obviously inexperienced, resorting to thuggish fighting techniques. "One punches me, the other punches you." Iron Man stood frozen in midair, unsure of whom to help. Jarvis had just analyzed his voice, confirming it was indeed Obadiah speaking. But what was going on? Were these self-destructing robots really not Obadiah's doing? And what about General Johnson? Had they originally planned to team up against him, but instead turned against each other? Iron Man felt that it wouldn't be right for him to help anyone, so he could only float in midair and watch the show. The steel monster punched General Johnson's mech, shattering the cockpit panel with a loud bang. General Johnson staggered back, waving his arms and shouting, "Howard's little lackey. Now he's trying to protect his son. How ridiculous." When he wanted to shut down Stark's defense division, didn't he even ask his good uncle's opinion? He never cares about your hard work, but now you want to be his security guard. Old Andre was right. The only right thing Howard did in his life was to hire you as a watchdog. The steel monster opposite remained silent. General Johnson then took another step back and said to Rhodes on the other side, "Look, this is your tomorrow. You all like to follow Stark around like a shadow, always at his beck and call. Friends? If he really considered you friends, he wouldn't be giving you outdated technical data. Our friend across the street served as Howard's watchdog his entire life. What did he get in return? He didn't even dare to rebel." Just as Rhodes and Stark were about to speak, Jarvis issued another piercing warning. "High-energy reaction detected. Take evasive action immediately. Take evasive action immediately. Take evasive action immediately." 3, 2. In an instant, another violent mushroom cloud rose up. The explosion of the behemoth piloted by General Johnson was even more extraordinary, leaving a crater hundreds of meters long in the ground and destroying half of the factory. No one expected him to be so decisive. Iron Man couldn't dodge in time, and his armor was almost blown to pieces. Rhodey's suit was completely destroyed. The Iron Man's defense was quite high, but it seemed that he couldn't stand up anymore. Perhaps General Johnson had made preparations in advance, because he was not killed by the explosion at the center of the self-destruction. Instead, he stood up from a safe room, holding a remote control in his hand. "You might think this is the end, but on the contrary, this is just the beginning," General Johnson said. Stark was hit on the head again, bleeding profusely. He wiped his eyes, helped Rhodes up from the mech and said, "Your boss has a really bad temper. Otherwise, how could I have been driven to such a dead end by him?" Rhodes said with a self-deprecating laugh, "You still haven't learned your lesson, Colonel Rhodes. None of the things Howard promised Obadiah have come true. He still only cares about his own son. Stark Jr. can shut down the most important military-industrial system with a single word, destroying half a generation's hard work. How ridiculous. For him, you refused my requests countless times, only bringing me a set of outdated mecha technology data. But what did you get in return? You were just an accessory to Iron Man. He was in the limelight, while you remained unknown, just like Howard and Obadiah. The ravings of a loser." A voice came from the steel monster still lying on the ground. "We chose old Andre because you were too stupid. Decades later you haven't changed at all, so I still didn't choose you, you idiot." Obadiah spoke slowly and softly, his tone completely unlike that of someone on the battlefield, which only infuriated Johnson further. He gritted his teeth and pressed the remote control hard. Dozens more robots flew over, smaller than the self-destructing robots, but looking more advanced. "Now you don't have Jaegers, but I do," General Johnson said. "Just like old Stark did back then. He outsmarted me with his new invention, and now it's my turn. Cough, cough. After all these decades, you still haven't figured out one thing." Obadiah's voice came. "A body made of iron is completely useless." Hearing this, Stark exhaled and slowly relaxed his shoulder muscles. He said to himself, "Maybe he's right, they're all right. Just having an iron shell is really useless. It won't make me any better off." Rhodes stared ahead, the towering robots making them, unarmed, appear even smaller. He said, "Stop lamenting. Don't you think we should start thinking of a solution?" Stark glanced up at the horde of robots that were closing in, then turned to Rhodes and said, "Do you think we're like them?" "No, you're worse than your father." On a piece of wasteland scorched black by the explosion, Stark looked down and touched his chest. Compared to the huge robots opposite him, they seemed weak and outnumbered, but Stark was not in a hurry at all. His tone was relaxed, as if he were chatting with an old friend. Then, in the pitch-black night, with only the faint light of the robot's eyes flickering like stars, Stark turned to Rhodes and asked, "Want a cigarette?" Bonus chapter for 5,000 words. Congratulations to Eon Fei, the first Alliance leader of this book. Applause. Actually, it happened a few days ago. but I'm only adding an extra chapter now. Let me explain why I haven't been updating as much lately. One reason is that I'm typing by voice, which isn't convenient when people come over. Another reason is that the editor said there might be a chance for a third-tier university to publish my work, so I need to control the word count. Don't you guys think I've written too many words for a new book? But don't worry, after the book is released, all the patrons and leaders will receive an extra chapter as a token of our gratitude. Patrons who join before the book is released will receive an additional chapter. Thank you, everyone. Chapter 52 Iron Man Never Backs Down. Rod said, "No, thank you, I don't smoke." Immediately afterward, he saw Stark casually take out a cigarette, toss it into the air, and instantly, a light blue and silver mech suit appeared on him. Rhodes swallowed hard and said, "Give me one, please." On the other side, General Johnson had just climbed back into the cockpit of a giant robot when he saw a fist the size of a sandbag. Iron Man was about to team up with Rhodes to take down Johnson when he was stopped by the resurrected Iron Man. He heard Obadiah say, "You know what? Most of the things I told you about your father weren't the truth. In reality, he smokes and drinks heavily, hangs out with women, daydreams all day, is good at coming up with sudden ideas, and after messing up a lot of things, he only lets others clean up his mess. All those heroic stories about him were made up by me. He was actually a complete bastard. But do you know how I stopped him when he was about to come up with another stupid idea?" Iron Man had a bad feeling, but before he could answer, a fist the size of a sandbag appeared in his field of vision. Watching Iron Man fly backward, Spider-Man rubbed his hands together and said, "Okay, now the question is, who should we help?" Captain America patted his shield and said, "I think Obadiah has a point. After all, he's Stark's elder, and he has more reason to beat him up than I do. But isn't it a bit inappropriate for us to look at it like this? Then let's not look anymore, let's go. There are still injured people to be carried onto the ambulances." Meanwhile, Iron Man, dazed and confused, scrambled to his feet from a pile of steel bars and said, "Wait, Uncle. Okay, Howard's a jerk and so am I, but I think there's a better way to solve this. I think we can sit down and talk, or have a board meeting or something, instead of always resorting to fists to solve problems." "You have no right to say that." With a roar, the giant robot leaped up and landed in front of him, casting a shadow over Iron Man's armor. Obadiah said, "You'll soon realize that this metal shell of yours is useless, even if you change its appearance." Iron Man was exasperated. Obadiah seemed determined to beat him up, and Iron Man's temper flared up. He said, "You'll soon find out if it's just a different look." As he spoke, he nimbly dodged the giant steel monster's fist like a bird in flight, and almost instantly flew behind the steel monster, punching it in the back. The steel monster swung its hand back, and Stark nimbly dodged again. Although his current armor was thinner and lighter, the modified power system made him faster and more agile. He stretched out his palm, and the steel bars in the nearby ruins began to tremble slightly. Then, in an instant, they flew up and pointed directly at the steel monster. Jarvis said to Stark, "The magnetic control system is still being upgraded and cannot operate at high frequencies. Furthermore, its energy is about to run out." Stark clenched his fist, and the steel bar flew towards the steel monster. Obadiah clearly hadn't expected this move either. After all, Iron Man's original style was that of a warrior who, apart from his palm cannon, spent most of his time throwing punches at enemies. But now, this silver and blue suit of armor made him look more like a mage. As Stark swung his arms, steel bars shot rapidly toward the steel monster. Obadiah only had time to maneuver his mech and dodge most of the steel bars on the left, but a few still hit his right arm. But he was much more decisive. The instant he was hit, he used the momentum to jump out and delivered an uppercut to Iron Man in midair. Sparks flew from Iron Man's armor. Not to be outdone, he dove in the opposite direction and punched the Iron Monster in the neck. The Iron Monster swayed slightly, grabbed Iron Man's leg, and threw him away. Iron Man was stunned again, and he landed right in the middle of the battlefield between Rhodes and General Johnson. Rhodes was also at a disadvantage. Iron Man shouted, "Come on, switch opponents. Let's start the second half." This was the right decision. Rhodes's mech was stronger, but he was facing General Johnson, whose massive mech had 8 tentacles. If he wasn't fast enough, he would be whipped out. It was indeed better for Stark's more agile mech to deal with him. Rhodes steadied himself, then pulled up and dove down, flying towards Obadiah's steel monster. After choosing the right opponent, the battle situation became clear. Stark used his high mobility to remove most of the tentacles on General Johnson's back. Without the tentacles to assist in movement, Johnson's mech became a real iron can, a punching bag for Iron Man. After a few punches, it started to burst into flames. The robots he summoned were mostly dealt with swiftly by Stark using his high speed. On the other side, Rhodes, who was going head-to-head with the Iron Monster, was not in good shape. However, the Iron Monster's legs had been damaged in the previous explosion. After a few rounds, the Iron Monster collapsed to the ground, seemingly unable to stand up again. Rhodes walked up to Iron Man and said, "I once heard my former superior, General Andre, mention that he knew your father when he was young, but I don't know the details. That damned, despicable Howard. He used contracts with the military to elevate old Andre. I shouldn't be a mere Air Force Major General." "None of that matters anymore," Stark said. "Now you probably won't even be a Major General. Everyone knows that only Iron Man can build these mechs. I'm using the technology you gave to the military, as long as—" "No, that's not what I meant. What I meant was that although Howard is a jerk, I think there are things we can learn from him, like finding the right partner in the military. Of course, not you. Didn't you want to shut down Stark's weapons manufacturing division? Where did you hear this rumor?" Johnson turned to look at Obadiah's mech. "Did my uncle tell you that? Did he tell you that every Stark is like that? We're very fickle. Just a few minutes ago, I changed my mind. Not only will I not shut down Stark's weapons manufacturing division, but I also plan to formally cooperate with the military. I happen to have a few ideas about individual exoskeletons and medical support systems." "No, you can't do this. Damn it. I've already promised Hammer Industries. A fool will always find another fool." Obadiah's voice came from afar again. Johnson's mech burst into a series of sparks, clearly indicating that he had hammered something inside. "It seems these mechs were made for you by Hammer Industries, but frankly, they're outdated." "Yes, you only gave Rhodes outdated technology." Even now, Johnson didn't forget to sow discord. Rod, standing nearby with his arms crossed, said, "He just gave me a cigarette, a really trendy one." Stark didn't waste any more words with Johnson. He walked over to the collapsed Iron Man, opened the cockpit, and found Obadiah lying inside. He didn't appear to be injured, but his complexion was terrible, and he looked like he was about to die. "Doctor, I need a doctor." Schiller appeared at the call, shrugged, and said, "I guess what you need isn't me as a therapist." "Of course, but stop talking nonsense and get him to the hospital quickly." The symbiote said to Schiller in his mind, "His heart." Schiller checked Obadiah's pulse and found that his heart rate was indeed abnormal. Obadiah coughed and said, "An external energy core is not enough to power such a behemoth." "You tampered with your own heart?" Schiller asked. Stark anxiously tugged at Obadiah's shirt, discovering a scar on his chest. He said urgently, "Hurry! Get him back to my lab. Damn it! Biomechanics is a dead end. It's just mortgaging his life. You're just as arbitrary as your father, never listening to anyone's opinions," Obadiah said, but seeing the blood streaming down Stark's forehead, he ultimately said nothing. "Take him back first. Coincidentally, I know a pretty good neurosurgeon. You'll see him at Stark Tower in a bit." After Schiller and Stark left, only General Johnson and Rhodes remained on the battlefield. Johnson was shouting wildly, "You damned madman! Rhodes, don't you know that a soldier's duty is to obey orders? I'm your superior now. That old Andre was retired and out of here a long time ago." "Yes, he retired with honors as a general, and he still got a high-paying, leisurely position in Congress, receiving a large pension. He spent 2 months in Hawaii last winter, and his granddaughter just got into Harvard." Johnson's mech exploded violently again. After a long pause, he said, "You'll regret it, Rhodes. Stark has never been trustworthy. You'll regret being his friend. They are selfish, sensitive, and suspicious, and they will destroy everything sooner or later. They have a genius brain that can save themselves, but they won't save you, they won't save a watchdog." Rhodes took off his mech and stepped out, looking around. The place had been completely reduced to ruins. Not far away, Spider-Man and Captain America were putting the wounded into ambulances. Most people had evacuated in an orderly manner, but many had been injured by the aftershocks of the explosion while escaping and were just being rescued. New York is a large city, and the aftermath of the battle only affected a few nearby streets. Further afield, the highways remained bustling with vehicles and pedestrians. Soon, A purplish-red glow appeared on the horizon, and dawn was approaching. You're right, the Starks are all a bunch of scoundrels. They're impulsive, willful, and never consider the consequences of their actions. They just wait for others to clean up their messes. But Iron Man is different. Rhodes looked at the light at the edge of the sky, reached out, took off his epaulets, looked down at them, pinched them between his fingertips, and then threw them at Johnson's face. Iron Man never backs down. Chapter 53: Speed of Life and Death. His condition is very bad. Aside from the risk of infection from all those messy wires he's put inside his body, he's also old, and his body's recovery ability isn't as good as a young person's. After the injury, there's a high risk of long-term sequelae. Even if he survives the infection and inflammation, his bodily functions will have been severely damaged. I think you could ask him if he has any last wishes. Stark slammed his fist on the table, the loud noise startling Strange. The notoriously difficult doctor said, "You'd better make sure the fee you're paying me is commensurate with your volatile temper." "I'm pretty sure your courage is worthy of my force," Schiller said to Strange. Stark looked at Obadiah lying on the lab table. His pupils were starting to dilate, and an extreme emotion enveloped him. He didn't understand why Obadiah had done this. "I've always wanted to prove to Howard that the biotechnology approach I proposed wasn't entirely useless. It can grant people enough power that even if their bodies are old and frail, they can still perfectly control mechs using their physical strength." "But you're about to die," Stark said angrily. "What could be more important than life?" "Howard died before me." Stark was speechless. Then he heard Obadiah sigh. He deserved to die young. It's a pity he died so young. Complex emotion rose in Stark's heart. He knew that Obadiah and Howard's relationship was not the perfect partnership that many people imagined. When you're on the same path as a peerless genius, few people won't feel jealous. Perhaps Obadiah once thought about proving that he could do just as well without Howard. It's a pity that without Howard, he doesn't know who he should prove himself to. Obadiah is old, and perhaps he knows that if he doesn't do this now, he'll never have another chance. There has to be one Stark who understands he's right. If the old Stark can't do it, then the young Stark can. "I have to find a way to save him." Stark lunged at the other experimental table and began frantically searching through the data. He had no time to think about Obadiah stealing his Jaeger core. Over the years, Obadiah had been almost his only family. Now that he was about to die, Stark couldn't care less about anything else. "A stent. We have to give him a stent," Stark said. Strange shook his head and said, "You have absolutely no medical knowledge. His heart is failing, and this isn't something a stent can solve." "Then let's shoot a few more. Unless you can mechanically rebuild his heart, his current heart is simply unable to function as a blood transfusion organ, and he will die of heart failure in no more than 3 hours. "Are you just a doctor who makes sarcastic remarks?" Stark asked angrily. Strange was even angrier than him. He said, "You rich guy, you've wasted my entire afternoon with just one sentence. I'm just telling the truth. He's beyond saving. Don't treat doctors like gods. If you poke 7 or 8 holes in your own heart, even God can't save you." Schiller patted Strange on the shoulder and said, "Can't you see the situation now? This rich man, who's so poor he only has money left, is willing to pay any price to save his uncle. As long as you can come up with a plan, you can name your price." Strange rubbed his temples and said, "We're both doctors. Don't I want to earn this money? If he can be saved through medical means, then there's no one in this world who can't be saved." "What did you just say?" Stark suddenly asked, turning his head. Strange was stunned. He said, "What did I say?" "Yes. A mechanical heart. Make him a new heart." Schiller glanced at his watch and said, "You only have 3 hours. After saying that, he glanced at Obadiah again. "That's still an optimistic estimate. I'm afraid that if it exceeds 2 hours, even with a new heart, his whole body will die from lack of blood." Stark said nothing. He suddenly quieted down, seemingly less irritable for a moment. His brain, cursed by knowledge, began to run wildly through all its threads. "That's absurd. You want to give a living person a heart made of a machine? What if there's a rejection reaction?" Strange said. Stark turned around and punched him. Schiller dragged him out of the lab. Strange rubbed his nose and said, "These damn rich people. Stop complaining. Think about the 7 or 8 figures he'll pay you for the consultation later. Does that make you feel better? Would he really pay that much? That's Stark. Look at the ground beneath your feet. One of these floor tiles might cost you a month's salary. Strange remained silent, which was unusual for him. It seemed that the large sum of money he was about to receive did not make him any happier. After a while, Stark suddenly rushed out and said, "I've got an idea. Yes, I've got a way. The arc reactor, that model. I need an assistant. Come quick. Come here right now." Strange remained seated, so Schiller stood up and said, "I'll do it, hopefully not another light bulb." Upon entering the lab, Schiller found it in complete disarray, littered with documents and materials scattered on the floor. Stark began fiddling with a lab bench filled with complex instruments, saying as he worked, "That model isn't just useful for its energy reaction structure. Its structure is perfectly adapted to the human body. As for the rejection reaction," Stark suddenly stopped what he was doing, placed his hands on the table, lowered his head, and said softly, "I almost died from rejection too. Maybe this is karma. Don't bring up your fatalistic ideas." Schiller glanced at Obadiah. He seemed to still be conscious, but the severe ischemia had rendered him unable to speak. He didn't look at Stark, but just kept staring at the experimental table. Perhaps young Obadiah also stood by, watching Howard enthusiastically bustling around the lab bench. Back then, they could do experiments all night long, then chat over breakfast about how these inventions would change the world. Back then, Howard was full of passion and ambition. He was an unparalleled genius. Obadiah was more like the shadow of a genius. Howard was born to change the world, while Obadiah only wanted to use his abilities to make his life a little better. Obadiah felt his whole body begin to heat up, a warm current flowing from his heart to his limbs, and in a hazy state, he saw countless images playing before his eyes. Howard died too young, but Obadiah is grateful that Howard died so young, because it gave him a beautiful friendship to remember before he died. A friendship that represented the most passionate and glorious years of his life. A behemoth rose to power under his rule until it came to dominate the world. Thank goodness Howard died so young. This friendship didn't gradually wear down and wither away in the mundane and unpredictable world. It remained forever bright, and even on his deathbed, it seemed to have no regrets. "You'd better hurry," Schiller said, looking at Obadiah. "We've misjudged him. You have at most an hour and a half before he loses his mind." Stark turned around in a panic and said, "No, no, wait. Don't do this, how could he? Just like you before, the will to survive is a very important thing. Once you lose it, your body will begin to deteriorate at a speed you can't imagine." Stark gripped the part tightly in his hand, said nothing, and turned back to continue his experiment. Schiller asked the symbiote in his mind, "Can't you rebuild him a heart?" "No. His heart is missing something and needs a symbiote to maintain it. He will die without me." Schiller thought back and realized that it was indeed the case in the comics. The elderly Eddie relied entirely on venom to transform his cells into part of his body, and he would die without venom. "There are parts that can be combined," the symbiote said again. Schiller told Stark, "You can try to make the parts, and I can reassemble them with flesh and blood without fixing and stitching." Stark pointed to the pen and blueprints and said to Schiller, "The structure of the arc reactor can be used on the heart. Look here, we'll replace the entire left ventricle, strengthen the myocardium here, and install an artificial heart pump here." Schiller called Strange in, and Strange, looking at the blueprint, said, "Theoretically speaking, it's possible, but I advise you not to do it. Combining the human body with metal carries significant risks. It's a problem the medical community has been unable to solve, and you're not a doctor. Even if you can temporarily revive him, there will be problems with subsequent parts maintenance and metal aging." Schiller said, "Obadiah seems to have been researching biomechanics all along. He must have some useful information. Jarvis, can you find out where Obadiah is doing his research?" Jarvis beeped and then said, "Calculation in progress. Locating successfully former Stark Industries site, also known as the former Stark Automobile Group. Storage device detected. The data has not been uploaded. Please wait. I am using physical hacking." A few minutes later, a mech flew in, carrying a heavy computer. Stark pulled out a USB drive and plugged it into the computer. Jarvis quickly said, "Data is encrypted. Decryption in progress. Decryption complete. All uploaded." Stark quickly turned to his console, and the moment he turned on the screen, he froze. The document was covered with dense data and drawings, which Schiller couldn't understand at all. After a while, Stark took 2 steps back and said, Perhaps he's right. He found another path. a path completely different from that of mechanical armor. "You're running out of time," Schiller said. "No, now I only need half an hour, no, 20 minutes. All this data is readily available. Jarvis will help me with the calculations right away. Let's start by building this model." An hour later, Stark, Schiller, and Strange emerged from the lab, both looking exhausted. Strange's hands were covered in blood. He said, "How could this happen? You actually made a heart out of a pile of scrap metal and made it beat. God!" Schiller wasn't much better off. Giving someone a heart transplant is physically demanding, and his chest was soaked in blood. Stark leaned against the wall, slowly sat down and said, "Am I really like my father? Blindly arrogant and headstrong?" "No." Stark looked up at Schiller, who was speaking. "You're worse than your father." Chapter 54, The Storm is Brewing. Now, I'll start highlighting the key points for this final exam. Please open your textbooks to page 1. Let's start from the table of contents and look at everything from the first section of chapter 1 to the last section of chapter 10. All of that is important. Turn down. You must memorize all but the pictures in the first 50 pages of this book. All conceptual statements will appear on the test paper in the form of fill-in-the-blank questions. After the third section of chapter 2 on page 60, the rest of the book will have essay questions and short answer questions. In addition, I will select some important content from the relevant content after chapter 7 to set topics for your final papers. The final papers will still be 3,000 words, and the ratio of the grade for the exam paper to the paper will be 7:3, while the ratio of the grade for the exam paper to the participation grade will be 6:4. In other words, if you can't get a good score on the exam, you will definitely fail the course. In addition, in accordance with Gotham University's long-standing tradition, starting next academic year, I will be preparing and organizing additional psychology courses. If you want to participate in this course, you must achieve a total score of 85 or above in this final exam. Related clubs and societies are also being prepared. Students who are interested in serving as administrators or club presidents can come to my office after class. All right, get out of class dismissed. Schiller closed his book and walked out of the classroom. Only then did the students below relax, and then a chorus of groans erupted. "My God, this book is thicker than my fist, and I'm going to memorize it all. Do you think he'll shoot me if I fail my test? I didn't see him carrying any pistol or revolver. I guess he might be using a melee weapon, such as a bayonet or a knife. Does anyone remember what chapter 3 was about? Where do the essay questions start? Help! Evans! Evans! Are you there? Do you have notes? Let me see them. Damn it. I've been taking naps for most of this semester. I haven't absorbed a single word. If my dad knew how hard I was studying in college, he would definitely cry with emotion." Bruce was also sitting in the crowd, but he wasn't as flustered as the others. For him, carrying a book wasn't a problem. He had something he wanted to discuss with Schiller concerning the construction of a private prison, but he could tell that Schiller was in a very bad mood. So Bruce hesitated for a moment and decided not to leave with Schiller. A little while later, Evans approached him and asked Bruce, "Did you hear what the professor just said about clubs and societies? I'd love to be in charge. I've always been in charge of class discipline and assignments for this course, but I wanted to ask for your opinion on the societies. Are you planning to get involved?" Bruce understood what Evans meant. Gotham University not only had interest groups, but also academic groups. Some popular courses would set up their own academic groups, which was equivalent to professors giving extra lessons to students. Of course, every group had to deal with funding issues, and many groups wanted to recruit Bruce because he was a very wealthy man. However, Bruce had never participated in any serious clubs. He was impatient with club work and didn't want to be chased around for money. But the psychology club was different. He felt he could get some extra help there, so he told Evans, "I'll go ask the professor if he can give me a position as club president. As for the club, I'm not interested. You can be the manager of both the class and the club." Bruce knew, of course, that Evans was Falcone's son, but Evans's family background was all too common in Gotham. There were at least 6 or 7 sons of mob bosses in this class alone, except that Evans's father was even more powerful. The group of people who usually hang out with Bruce are mostly the sons and nephews of various gang leaders. In a sense, Batman's other identity can be considered as being deep behind enemy lines. To understand why Schiller was in such a bad mood, we have to start from this morning. On the Marvel side, Obadiah was rescued, but he was still very weak. Although his heart was functioning well, as Strange said, he was too old and his physical functions were too poor. He still had to stay in the intensive care unit. Stark stayed with him the whole time. Stark was his only family member, and even Pepper couldn't interrupt their deep father-son bond. Rhodes temporarily left the military, saying he hadn't been on vacation for several years. So, on the eve of Schiller's departure, he and Dr. Ethan joined an Antarctic expedition, temporarily leaving New York. Although many mysteries surrounding Iron Man remain unsolved, things have calmed down for the time being. So Schiller returned to Gotham. When he woke up this morning, he found that the weather in Gotham was unusually good. Although there was still a thin layer of fog, he could actually see the sunlight shining on the ground, which was quite rare. So he decided to take advantage of this great opportunity and use a random chat. After the Iron Man event ended, he got another chat opportunity, but he still had one left from the last event, so now he had two. But as it turns out, Gotham truly lives up to its reputation as a place of extraordinary people and strange phenomena. Schiller opened the chat panel and used random chat. The avatar that appeared had black hair and wore a green eye patch. Schiller shut down the system in a panic. Green Lantern. That's right, it's Green Lantern, played by the same actor as Deadpool. Although Deadpool hasn't appeared in person, he's everywhere. Schiller hasn't even met Deadpool yet, but he's already surrounded by him. I have to ask you, have you ever seen any strange flying objects? I mean, the traditional flying saucer. Green Lantern quickly sent a message. Schiller deduced from this line of text that Green Lantern Hell might be encountering a crashed alien spaceship, and it was through this incident that he obtained the Green Lantern ring entrusted to him by the aliens. Schiller clicked on the portrait, and sure enough, Hal's abilities could not be copied yet, because he had not yet become Green Lantern. Schiller replied, I vaguely remember seeing it a few times. What? You saw a UFO? I can recommend a website to you. It's full of records of these things. You can browse through it carefully. I've searched everywhere, including websites around the world that record UFOs, but all they show are things flying in the sky. Then what did you see? If an unidentified flying object isn't flying in the sky, how can it be called an unidentified flying object? Oh, of course. It certainly used to fly in the sky. No, never mind. It seems that Hal also realized that he shouldn't reveal so much information to a stranger he just met on the forum. After all, if the other party found out that he had discovered a crashed UFO, he would likely be contacted by the military. Schiller sighed. Putting aside what kind of power the Green Lantern ring could give him, he just couldn't accept the fact that Green Lantern was another Deadpool. He hoped that Green Lantern was just like the character in the comics and not another chatterbox. By the afternoon, Schiller was in a better mood. At that moment, Gordon came to find him and asked, Have you seen Falcone recently? That's right, so what? In Gotham, dealing with gangsters is not shameful, or rather, no one can avoid dealing with gangsters. In Gotham, being able to exchange a few words with the Godfather is something to be proud of. Gordon said, Our new police chief seems to be one of Godfather's men, which isn't surprising, but I'm wondering how he plans to handle this mess. Although I know that Falcone was a radical hawk in his early years, he seems to be turning towards a conservative in recent years. I just want to find out in advance which way the Gotham Police Department is going. It might sound absurd that the police chief is a gangster Godfather's man, but it's perfectly normal in Gotham. Although Gordon is a righteous and good cop, he understands Gotham's ecosystem better than anyone else, so he won't be the kind of reckless hothead who plans to overthrow the entire order by himself. On the contrary, he wanted to find a unique way out in the complex game, so he had to make good relations with all parties. I became the Godfather's tutor, responsible for teaching his son. You're right, the Godfather has become more and more conservative in recent years, probably because he's getting old. I think you don't need to worry about him taking drastic measures. On the contrary, in a sense, he might help you deal with those troublemakers. Schiller sat down, poured Gordon a cup of coffee, and said, The last time I went to his house, the heads of several families were having a meeting. I heard that things have been a bit unsettled at the Eastern Docks lately. Gordon sighed and said, I just found out that the Edward family, which has always controlled the 5 docks in the East, has experienced internal turmoil. Young Edward killed his father and also fell out with his uncle. You know how important those docks are? 60% of Gotham's smuggled goods come from there. I've heard that the Edward family is old enough to be considered a native Gotham family, even predating the Falcone family by a considerable margin. It's hard for me to say. I just dealt with a shootout there yesterday. The new director has already been invited by Edward. I came to ask you today because I want to know whether Falcone intends to get involved in this matter. If he does, will he side with Edward? If it really is Edward Jr. who takes over the Edward family, Gordon sighed and said, he's a complete madman and won't embargo many dangerous goods like Edward Sr., then Gotham will be in chaos again. Gotham is always in this mess. Don't worry. The police can't do anything about it right now. At worst, you can just make a few more trips to clean up the mess. As for His Excellency the Godfather, Schiller shook his head and said, I can only say that Falcone is more like your friend and ally than an enemy now. He wants Gotham to fall into chaos even less than you do. Thank you all for the recent donations. I've saved screenshots and will add more chapters when the book is officially released. Thank you. I've already asked the editor about the book title. Chapter 55 Murder on a Rainy Night. A cool autumn rain fell in Gotham, casting a hazy mist under the streetlights. The cold light of car headlights gradually spread from the corner, illuminating the end of the dark alley. The vibrant colors of the neon lights reflected on the black car body. The car door opened, and the driver got out, holding a black umbrella, and went to the back seat to open the door. The waiters at the mansion's entrance, all dressed in white shirts and champagne-colored vests, rushed over and laid a carpet under the car door. Schiller stepped out of the car, his leather shoes resting on the carpet. He had just straightened up when he saw a customer who had walked in front of him throw a huge umbrella into the arms of a skinny umbrella boy. The umbrella was covered in water droplets, which soaked the boy completely. The waiters near the entrance were whispering and mocking him. Schiller took the umbrella himself and walked to the door. A blonde manager came out enthusiastically and said, Are you Professor Rodriguez? His Majesty the Godfather is already waiting for you. As soon as he finished speaking, Evans came down the stairs, gave Schiller a warm hug and said, Thank you, Professor Schiller. My coming-of-age ceremony is hardly worth all the trouble you've gone to. It's nothing, happy birthday. As the two were talking, Schiller caught a glimpse of the umbrella boy carrying a huge umbrella out of the corner of his eye. He looked to be about the same age as Evans, but he was thin and small, with a hooked nose and a somewhat sinister look in his eyes. He didn't look very likable. He was trying to fold up the huge umbrella in his arms, but because he was so thin, his movements looked a bit comical. Schiller noticed that his cufflinks were fastened meticulously, making him look more like a high-ranking official attending a party than a waiter. Seeing that Schiller was still carrying his own umbrella, Evans was a little unhappy. He also turned to look at the umbrella boy. The manager was good at reading people's expressions. He walked up to him, patted the umbrella boy on the back of the head, and then had someone next to him take the huge umbrella. Schiller's umbrella was already folded up. He held the middle part of the umbrella and handed the handle to the umbrella boy. The boy rolled his somewhat cloudy eyes up, glanced at Schiller, and then lowered his head and meekly accepted the umbrella. This little incident did not affect Evan's birthday party at all, and surprisingly, Bruce also came. Of course, they were classmates after all and belonged to similar social classes, both being upper-class members of Gotham. Schiller, holding a glass of wine, was talking to Evans about the club when his father called him away. Bruce came over and said, Won't you eat something first, Professor? Schiller shook his head and asked him, You said last time that you wanted to be the head of the club? That's really strange. Just as Bruce was about to speak, he heard Schiller say, Judging from the quality of your submitted papers, you might not be very suited to studying psychology, let alone be the head of a club. Don't do that, of course you know why I did it. But that's no excuse for you to pollute my eyes with a bunch of academic garbage. Okay, how much club membership fee would make you waver a little in your academic commitment? Would $200 million be enough? Schiller cursed inwardly, but still said, I suggest you change your disguise. Can you really handle spending all your time hanging out with scumbags? I use ginger juice instead of alcoholic beverages, and the powder that burns is just ordinary spices. Schiller didn't speak, but silently looked down at his waist. Bruce said, Well, there is indeed a problem. As they were talking, the lights in the center of the banquet hall lit up one by one, and Falcone led Evans down the central staircase. This is an important part of the coming-of-age ceremony, in which elders introduce their child to their social circle, indicating that he is now able to participate in social activities normally and take on the mission of inheriting the family business. Afterwards, Schiller and the other elders encouraged Evans. Finally, Evans himself made the sign of the cross on his chest with great piety and then thanked God. Just as Evans was speaking, Schiller noticed, out of the corner of his eye on his right, that a small, thin figure seemed to be hiding in the shadow of the heavy curtain. But after the crowd gathered in the center dispersed, the figure disappeared. Then the normal ball and banquet process began. The lights shone brightly, glasses clinked, and people chatted amongst themselves in the magnificent banquet hall. However, just like Schiller was treated at Shield, almost no one would approach him to talk. Everyone knew about his amazing resume, and no one wanted to spend too much time in front of someone who might be able to see through their inner secrets. After a while, the banquet came to an end. Schiller felt a little hungry and planned to go to the nearby buffet table to get something to eat. Just then, he heard some noises behind the stairs to his right. Soon, a lady in a gorgeous dress came running out screaming, "Old Edward! He's collapsed in the restroom." Everyone around hurriedly dispersed, and Falcone said in a calm voice, "Quiet down, Andy. Go and see what's going on." One of the men beside the Godfather walked away, and soon returned to whisper a few words in Falcone's ear. Falcone's eyes swept over everyone present, and intimidated by his imposing presence, no one dared to utter a sound. Falcone said, "Old Edward died at my son's coming-of-age ceremony." The banquet hall, which could hold hundreds of people, was so quiet it was as if nothing existed. No one even dared to breathe loudly. Everyone was wondering who was so bold as to cause trouble on the Godfather's turf. Falcone, holding his cane, said, "Where is little Edward? Tell him to come see me. His uncle died here and he has to come. Also, go to the police station and have them send someone to investigate. Evans, you take good care of my guests and don't let them feel neglected." After that, Falcone gave his assistant Andy a look and then turned and left. Bruce stood next to Schiller and asked him, "You saw it too, didn't you?" "Yes, but it has nothing to do with me." Bruce said, "It looks like Edward Jr. is going to win, and things are about to get chaotic at the docks." "You think it was Edward Jr. who did it? He's the one who profited the most, isn't he?" Schiller shook his head and said, "I think the Edward family is the biggest loser. Old Edward is dead, and everyone will think that his nephew did it. But with such a thing happening at the Godfather's only son's coming-of-age ceremony, it's not too much for the Godfather to take revenge on the Edward family later." "You think Falcone orchestrated this whole thing himself?" "He is more shrewd than you think." Bruce glanced back. The once bustling banquet hall was now completely deserted. Most people had left, not daring to linger while the Godfather was still angry. The remaining leftovers looked even more desolate under the still bright lights. As Schiller was about to leave, the umbrella was returned to him by the Godfather's assistant. Andy said, "I'm sorry, Professor. The Godfather asked me to convey his apologies. We never expected that such a thing would happen at the first banquet we invited you to." "Yes, none of us expected this." Schiller glanced down at his umbrella, which was now completely dry. Standing under the porch, he saw a group of people carrying a box near the side entrance of the mansion. Inside should be old Edward's body. They loaded the box onto the car and, judging by the direction the car drove off, assumed his body would be thrown into the sea. Schiller stood at the door for a while longer, and soon police lights flashed in the rainy night as police cars drove in. That's right, that's how it is in Gotham. They don't wait for the police to come to dispose of bodies. Gordon arrived at another crime scene where neither the victim nor the killer had left any trace. They had even wiped the blood clean, but he was quite at ease and methodically directed his officers to wander around the restroom. He himself neither handled the case nor kept records, but instead went to see Falcone under the guidance of others. The outcome of this investigation did not depend on what happened in the restroom or what the police could find out, but solely on the attitude of one person, the host of the banquet, Falcone. That's how it is in Gotham. When one gang member kills another, the police are in a very awkward position. Gordon understands this deeply. In Gotham, psychological qualities are much more important than crime-solving skills when you're a police officer. After a while, Evans came out with an umbrella. He hurriedly ran towards Schiller and said, "Professor, I heard from others that you haven't left yet. Is there anything else?" "No, nothing special. You know, I'm more interested in these kinds of cases." Evans looked somewhat embarrassed and said, It's just a small case. Not a serial murder case, but if you're interested, you can go in and take a look." Schiller shook his head, but handed the umbrella to Evans and said, "Take this to my Godfather." Evans took the umbrella, feeling somewhat bewildered. After Schiller left, Falcone took Schiller's black umbrella from Evans and said, "It seems he will indeed be your longest-serving governess." Sitting in the car on the way back, Schiller listened to the rain pattering against the window and recalled the thin, timid umbrella boy the guest who had entered before him and teased the umbrella boy with a huge umbrella. It was old Edward. Schiller had just returned to his apartment when he heard a noise on the balcony. Batman was standing there. Schiller didn't turn around. Batman said, "I'm going to investigate old Edward's case." "Why? Gang fights are also within your jurisdiction. He used to be the head of Park Street." Schiller didn't answer him, but Batman continued, "He knows who killed my parents.